Sacred Time Podcast. My name is Dennis Kaminsky. Joining me today, as always, is my co-host, the Big Blurred, Maurice Starr. Maurice, how you feeling today?
I'm good, man. How about you?
Feeling all right. This episode's going to be a lot less cryy than the last episode. But we're going to get to the bottom of a lot of other things, and I just want to start by jumping right into it. Maurice, we're going to look to you to answer the biggest question that we've probably ever asked on this podcast. What can we do to make sure that all of the races in the world get along? And if you don't have any solutions, who do you believe will ultimately win the war for Earth, and why? Don't answer that question.
I was going to say, this is a pretty multifaceted question, sir.
Yes, it is. There are no right answers. Every answer will piss somebody off, and justifiably so.
Well, when you said the war for the Earth, at that point, I stopped thinking about, like, people, and I'm like, you think there's, like, alien races out there fighting over us?
So you're going to go with the alien races. You're not picking anybody in the human race.
I mean, if it's a war for Earth, like, we already kind of lost that. We didn't do great with it. And unfortunately, as much as there's a lot of environmental efforts being done now to cut back on our, our footprint on the environment, we're still trampling it every day. Even I thought, like, the big thing that's going to change it was electric cars. But then I thought about it, I'm like, I don't know, because unless we just somehow switch to a different type of energy generation from fossil fuels, like your house is powered by gas. So until houses stop being powered by gas, if we get away from that, maybe. But we're still making heat, and there's a whole bunch of science shit that I don't know enough about. So
yeah, I think all people are equal.
Yeah.
I have no answer to that question. No, I'm sure.
But, we do have actually a few questions that I'm going to ask today. Similar to the previous podcast, I just got some topics I'm going to throw out there. We can give our own opinions about some of them. I'm going to be a bit more specific and ask, whether you think it's something that's overrated, underrated, and we'll just go with our own opinions on that one. But
okay, so
I think I got some good ones.
What we're going to be doing is Maurice is just going to be firing off subject after subject, and we're going to be sharing our opinions on what subject it is specifically that it brings up. We did an episode like this a few episodes ago, and this was our way of letting Maurice carry the episode because I'm tired.
Yeah.
We had 3 hours last time. That shit was long.
I wish I had a pillow that day. Okay, that didn't sound right. I'm in a pillow because
I poured my heart out. Damn, man, I poured my heart out.
I meant a pillow more so in the sense my chair wasn't comfy.
I understand. I will say, though, what was funny, when I was going through and I was looking at stuff so I could pick like a thumbnail and stuff for the video, dude, you look asleep 100% of the time in that episode. It's just because you're looking down at the camera, or you're looking down at me speaking instead of looking into the camera, which is usually the proper thing to do when somebody else is speaking. But because of that, like, every single shot for you looks like this. I don't know if I'm looking cross-eyed or not. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm sorry. I just went cross-eyed on accident.
Am I cross-eyed?
No, I'm bad at doing impressions.
I mean, so if the impression was sleep, all you had to do was close your eyes. The second you crossed them, now we got to ask some questions.
But no, it's like...
No, I definitely seen it. I hate it.
And then every time you look up, I'm like, oh, shit, he's still here.
Yeah. I mean, it was more of like, it was a serious face, because I was taking everything seriously, but because of the fact that I also already have, like, very squinty eyes, me looking down, absolutely. Oh, I don't see the problem with that one.
That's fucked up, dude.
It's true. Unless I'm, like, literally lifting my eyebrows up, my eyes just kind of stay the same level, but
Understood completely. Well, in that case, then, before you get yourself in too much trouble, let's let you start firing off some subjects.
Okay, so first one, this is actually over-under, so you let me know what you think. The state of Florida, overrated or underrated?
Very overrated. Very much so. It's cool, I guess. When I went down there, it was very humid. It was kind of muggy. I wasn't a really big fan of it. Seems like that's where everybody goes to retire, and nothing in the world is more annoying than retired people. Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of most of their sports. I'm a Miami Hurricanes fan, but with the exception of that, I dislike strongly most teams from Florida. And I know that's not the only reason why you're supposed to evaluate a state, like is based off of the sports, but now that I'm thinking
Hey,
about it, I'm
that's
not
a
a
big
Gators
part.
fan, not a Florida State fan. I don't like the Heat. I like the Dolphins. I'm a Dolphins fan too, I guess. I
I
lied.
like.
Maybe Florida's not bad. Maybe it's rated.
I'm gonna tell you why it's overrated for me.
Okay.
I'm never gonna live somewhere where I have to contemplate on a yearly basis: is my house still gonna be here? And I feel for everybody who doesn't have the opportunity or the way to move somewhere else that are in those situations. But I mean, it's literally every year. What is it? November to or no? I'm thinking maybe two. No, yeah. I think it's around November or November's a part of it. But hurricane season, like
Yeah.
that shit's it's coming. I know tornadoes can happen in Michigan. There was one that happened near our community like years ago, 3 years ago now.
I wasn't
And that
living
was
here when
like
that
before that, it was maybe 7 years. So maybe we just got good luck. Whatever. I'm not a meteorologist to say yay or nay, but I could not do that. I couldn't do it down there.
I'm right there with you. I agree. I will say though, they have the benefit of being prepared. When it happens to us,
Yeah.
we're going to be cocky about it because our whole life, every year, they got to get ready and do something. So to me, it's like an active fighter. Like they're constantly participating in rounds, so they're always ready for the fight. Whereas in our instance, we're fucked when it happens. We got ring rust.
True. We don't.
3 years since we had a minor tornado.
Yeah.
Well, where we
Yeah,
were,
I
at,
don't-
at
we don't
least
have any,
anyways. Some other people had it worse.
storm
My apologies
shelters.
on the camera.
When I watched the movie Twister, I knew growing up, like, I gotta have a storm shelter. I don't care to have a storm shelter at this point
I've
because
never seen
I'm not in
Twister.
that movie. So, staying with the theme of Florida, though.
Okay.
Next one is
2 questions about
Jameis
Florida to
Winston.
start it off. Is this an overrated or underrated question?
yeah.
Insanely underrated, in my opinion. The dude had 2 incredible seasons in college back to back. He's one of the watching him play in college was incredibly fun. He's always had a little bit of an issue with decision making. He's ballsy to say the least with some of the throws that he makes. Dude's got a crazy arm. That's the thing, man. When you look at his numbers, and you can't take out the interceptions; it's too big of a factor. But when you look at his numbers without the interceptions, if you can clean up on those turnovers, it's scary to think that those numbers go higher.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, when you got a guy who signed a 1-year contract last year to be not even really a backup, almost a third string, alternative quarterback, dude's first round pick, in my opinion, or his first pick overall, I think that was justified. I still think it's justified. I think he's going to have a really good career on the Saints as he keeps moving forward. I think he's very underrated. Today, in 2015, he's overrated. The year he got drafted. But in 2021, a few years later, he's incredibly underrated. I think a lot of people still kind of view him as a joke, and I don't think that that's the case.
I share the same sentiment. So instead of re-saying what you just said, we'll move on to the next one.
And I don't know if you remember though, when he won when he won the Heisman, there were some funny ass memes, like Crawfish speaking,
Yeah.
and they were talking like when he was giving his speech, they were he's from I don't know where he's
That's
from.
a good question. I don't
He's
know
from
where
the South though, I know that.
100%.
But he was he was doing his acceptance speech, and he was doing the scrong thing. And then the meme that I saw was one of the Crawfish, and it's like when he came and grabbed him, it's like, hey, you scrong, I'm scrong, hey, we scrong then, let's get it going.
Hey.
So as long as stuff like that keeps happening, I wish they would go back to the time he stole the crabs.
As long as he avoids eating W's, that I tried it. It was
Nah,
funny
that was
when I
weird.
seen
That
it,
was
but every
weird.
time I watch
Yeah,
it now,
it was
it's
odd.
just weird. It's just it. I
He's a
got
bit of
where
an
he was
awkward
coming
dude.
from, but
He's a bit of an awkward guy, but I like him. I've been a Jameis Winston fan for a few years.
same here, man. All right, next on the list we got, and I don't know if you actually tried one of these. I had tried one of these for the first time last week.
Is this also an over
Popeyes.
and underrated?
It's more your opinion on this one, but if you want to
Okay.
go with that
Gotcha.
general sense, that's fine. But Popeye's chicken sandwich. do you
I was a
think about
fan. I had it twice. When it first came out, we were coming home from work, and we stopped by to grab it, and we had to wait in line for like 25 minutes. And I thought, there's no way in hell that this is going to be worth that. And then when I got done eating it, I was like, okay, that was a very good chicken sandwich. And then we went back a second time, and they didn't make it the same way. So, I don't know. I guess it depends on what Popeyes you live by. Today,
True.
probably not worth it. I know there's a little bit of a chicken shortage, so prices are going up on a lot of things like that. It's crazy, though, to think. I will say, I never in my life saw a chicken sandwich war coming.
Yeah.
Seems like such a basic concept, but it's been interesting in the last 2 or 3 years to see all of these fast food restaurants fighting over who has the best chicken sandwich.
Yeah, I don't know what really. Well, what birthed it was some of the social media teams for some of these restaurants are legit.
Yeah, it's like talking shit. No, they just talk shit. That's all.
Well, I mean, they just talk shit, but it's the right kind, because you see with some, it's always corny, and it's always like, hey,
and
you
most
guys
of
are
those
trying
restaurants
really
don't
hard.
have real food. It's fast food quality, so it's hilarious to me to see anybody who works for like Arby's or something like that talking mad shit. Like when
They
you
do
find
some cool shit though. You see what they do
Arby's?
social media wise? Yeah.
No, I just know Jon Stewart shits on them, so they lost a long time ago. He used to have a segment on his show where he would trash Arby's because of how poor quality their food is. So I've never in my life followed anything Arby's. I like curly fries, though. I know that wasn't the question, but Popeye's chicken is cool. Popeye's chicken is the shiznit.
Yeah, no,
I don't know if that's...
it's cool. I'd say of all of them, and I haven't had all of them, but that's been like the best one I've had. But
the Popeye sandwich.
I still would say they're definitely something that shouldn't have gotten as popular as it did. Like once it got to the point where you had stuff about like the poor conditions being brought up and certain.
I think somebody died. I think there was legitimately a killing over it, if I remember correctly.
Like, I wouldn't be surprised, like whether it's direct or indirect, just because of how the frenzy about it. And you could question, like, okay, is that people, or should we just point out Popeye's chicken sandwich for it? But it was involved in it regardless. So I will say, as much as it's a good sandwich, it's not that good. It's not a 25-minute wait in line good. So the first time I get it, but after that, I was like, I've never had to want to go out of my way and like, let me make sure I hit up that Popeyes, knowing damn well I'm not going to get home anytime soon.
This is a story written on November 14th, 2019. Man arrested in fatal stabbing over Popeye's chicken sandwich in Maryland. Shit. So that's, yeah. That was all because of the sandwich. It's life or death good. I'm going overrated then. If people are dying, then I'm going to say overrated. I don't remember.
Definitely overrated. But the one part that I did find funny was you had some people selling weed with the little bag that the sandwich comes in. Like they would put halves in there. It was. I thought that was hilarious, but
I'd be kind of mad. I'm not gonna lie.
Hey, it's recycling. I like it. You're saving the earth. You could have threw that shit away instead. Now you're giving another gift with it. So anyway, next one I got immortality. What do you think? Is that overrated, underrated?
Who wants to live forever? Who dares to love forever? Fuck that.
I'm of the opinion, like, I think it's underrated only because that's the usual take on it. And I'm like, no one's done it. Like, as much as we can have stories and we speculate, like, who would want that? Who would survive in that? Who would enjoy living past all your loved ones? And, like, you think you get to a point where you probably did it all or something like that. I'm on the other side, like, I've never met anyone who's done that. So who's to say it's not something incredible? Like, you just get to witness and see everything. Like, it's never like
one person in the world should be allowed to be immortal just so that we can always learn from that person. With the exception of like the potential benefit of having somebody who was actually there for the Holocaust, who was actually there when the Roman Empire collapsed, like with the exception of something like that, fuck that. That sounds like a horrible. What's the fun in living if you're going to keep going forever? Like, why would you ever do anything the next day? If every single day you can, like, if you told me, all right, you're going to, nobody ever knows when they're going to go, right? That's where a lot of the urgency in living comes from. But if you told me definitively you have 15 years and then you're going to die, most people would assume, you know what? I'm going to cram in as much in the next 15 years as I possibly can. right? I'm going to make every single moment worth it. Now imagine if I told you it's going to be 15,000 years. Then all of a sudden you're like, well, I can take a month off. You know what I mean? Maybe I'll take a year or two. Maybe I'll take 25 years off. Maybe I'll spend the next 30 years just sitting at home and not really doing much. And eventually I'm sure you'll get bored. But yeah, it sounds horrible. And everything in culture constantly changes around you. So every time you think something's cool, then you're like 100 years later, you're like, damn, man, I miss back in the day when we used to, have 15 wives or whatever the hell the case is. Everybody you ever meet dies, and that sucks too. You always got to make new friends. So you have to be incredibly social if you're going to be immortal.
But I also think, like, that way of thinking is just a part of our social norms and knowing that death is imminent. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, because it is. So it's
right?
a social norm because it's a basic fact.
But you have to kind of, you have to try to, and this is the part that I find interesting about it, you have to try to also be like, well, we know this and we value these things because for as long as humans existed, this has been a truth. It's akin to certain truths like, I'm trying to think of like a good example, like truths about like how people thought like there was the globe wasn't round. Mm-hmm. It took a big part of people to finally accept that as a reality that, hey, there actually is another side of the world. It's a sphere and we go around the sun. Like, that wasn't something that people could grasp at the time. That if you brought it up, you're like, what? And of course that's not it. In the same sense how, like I said, I totally get, and I don't disagree necessarily with the fact that living for, like, being immortal, it would be very sad and depressing. But I also kind of go, well, if that's it and you don't have a choice with it, there's also the part of it where I would think, or at least I would hope, I think like for myself, I'd have to force myself to find something in it. And if anything, if I know I'm that different, like you said, if there's one person that does it and I'm that person, now more than anything, I feel like, oh yeah, I'm definitely got to start taking care of some shit because I know how this works. I've seen the patterns. I know what's going to happen, or I know I have an idea what's going to happen. I can lend this wisdom.
That's even worse. So you're the only person who's immortal then in that case, right? I apologize for interrupting you. So you're the one immortal person. So now you have to live in a world consistently where everybody around you is afraid that tomorrow is their last day. So that progress that you're going to preach for them to make, hey, I've seen this 1,000 times. Like, we don't fucking care, dude. We're going to die tomorrow. So your whole life, it's just, you were already a manager at a place. You know how that shit goes.
Well, in terms of trying to share those ideologies with somebody, like, of course, it's the exact same thing. I'm blanking on the guy's name, but was it Newton who...
Sir Isaac Newton?
Was he the one who discovered gravity, or at least not discovered gravity,
Newton's
but
law.
You know,
hit in the head with an apple, and he was like, "That was up in the sky a second ago."
You know what I'm saying? It's the point though when that was brought up, nobody was, or not nobody, but most people were like, "What are you talking about?" You know what I'm saying? Like, there's not something that's just easily adopted. So I guess, yeah, I wouldn't maybe necessarily go the route of trying to make change in that sense of saying, presenting it in that way. If anything, I'd be like what you usually see in a story where I'd be that character that gets some type of surgery and just keeps changing my face and just keeps trying to do some other shit to benefit the world. I have fun thinking about it, but I guess my last point, we can move on from this, is just with the concept of it, I just always thought it's very much it's almost always goes in a direction that is never good. And I don't think that that's 100% true. If anything, if one of these days I get around to writing something, I'd be interested in writing something different. Like, instead of the guy just hates life because everybody dies, like, that's going to be true. But you also have the rest of time to kind of get to a point of moving forward. It's unfortunate. It's okay. So I told you to watch that show Invincible. We'll talk more about this when you watch that, because it's got a
I'm still anti-immortality. I don't think that it makes everything horrible. I think there are obviously the benefits of knowing everything that has ever happened. But with that being, I think there are way more negatives than positives. I think the one positive is you don't ever have to worry about dying. But
True.
I do think that takes away a lot of the goodness in life. So it makes it so
True.
beautiful.
Very true. All right, next one.
So Jameis Winston and immortality. Hell yeah, let's keep shooting them out.
Next one I got is Twitter. And this is just be your opinion or if overrated, underrated.
That would be a full episode in its own right. A conversation about Twitter. That's a very deep conversation. I am on the fence. I think I don't know. There are benefits and there are drawbacks. It's interesting to see the drawbacks. The benefits are that people can communicate, and there are a lot of things that have been shared with the world that probably wouldn't have been shared with the world otherwise. There's a lot of misinformation that can be spread through something like Twitter as well. We're in the early stages. That one I think we'll save for a bigger conversation. What about yourself?
I'm definitely down to have a bigger conversation about it. The one quick thing I'll say is I never liked the limited character aspect of it. I get it for the format that you're trying to fit for the platform, but when it starts to be used to express ideals, it's like you don't get to fully express certain ideas in 140 characters, and you could do that. I don't know what you call it when you do the multiple tweets in a row or whatever, but it's
or you take a picture of your notepad. That seems like another way that people have.
That's another. Yeah,
I agree.
So I mean, there's ways around it, I guess.
Exactly. When it's used as the world's town hall, I think it needs to be a little more in depth. Again, it's a completely different conversation. That seems like its own podcast altogether, right there.
And come back for whenever that episode's going to be. Maybe next episode.
Give us like 5 years. We're going to take a lot of time doing research and stuff. I'm going to read every tweet ever first. So whenever I get done doing that, we'll do it.
Can you read the first one? Wasn't that sold as an NFT? So like that's theirs now, or I don't even know how that shit works.
If I really wanted to, I don't know. NFTs, they don't mean anything to me. I don't know what it means entirely. I've had it explained to me, but I don't fully understand the concept. Mainly because I saw they did that. What was it? Charlie Bit My Finger. They sold that one, and they were like, yeah, it's not going to be on YouTube anymore. But they're like, no, it's still good. It's on YouTube. So I don't know what it does.
I don't know.
Hey, good for people. If you got the money to buy one of those things, I guess that's awesome.
Yeah, I just think it's shitty because it's the shitty part is where there's like legit scams when it comes to art. Like I don't know if you've seen not to get too into another side thing, but there's a guy, artist. I think he was an Italian artist who sold a artwork that was literally nothing. It was air. It was nothing. It's invisible. He said
with the banana taped to the wall.
No, nothing. Like this just happened. He sold it for 18,000.
I understand. Yeah.
Like,
listen, good for those people. They're slick talkers. I think something there. They convinced somebody somewhere that their intentions were good, and that this is pure art. And I don't know, man. Good for people who can make that much money off of shit like that. Somebody made a bunch of money taping a banana to a wall.
Yeah.
So I mean, good for them, I guess.
At least that was a little bit more effort. Like he had to get tape, then he had to get a banana, then he had to tape it to the wall. He didn't just say, "Hey, you see this? Oh, you don't see nothing? That's because you're not using your imagination. Now pay me 18,000."
I give him the creativity of it. I give him the creativity of it a little bit. It's not a great. I wouldn't buy it one way or the other because I can. I have one of those too, actually. Now that I mention it.
Oh shit! Where'd you get that from?
It's as big.
So this is where I wish we had a soundboard because I would have did that. Damn, son, where you find that at? Just whatever that.
Oh, you could have just used your voice as the soundboard. Watch you do it, and I'll be the soundboard.
Well, I don't know what the actual thing is. I just know that beginning part.
Well, you got to do your demonstration, and I'll be the soundboard.
What do you mean? Press a button?
No, you're good. I'll be the. I was just gonna. Yeah, it's.
We'll come back.
You don't know how to use your imagination, so you wouldn't understand.
There you go. All right, the next one. This is your opinion about the GOAT status in sports, like when you refer to. Okay,
it means absolutely nothing. People use the term GOAT to explain the current best at something. The greatest of all time is very difficult to prove in most instances. Every single sport that the conversation is had in, the sport isn't the same as it used to be. So you're literally comparing apples to oranges in most instances to me. There can only be one greatest of all time. There cannot be multiple greatests of all time because that's a different conversation entirely. I don't know. I think it's one of those things. I understand it. It's a really good marketing tool. I think that's more than anything what it's being utilized as right now is like you see like LeBron's the GOAT, right? Or Luka Doncic is the GOAT in making. It's like, well, anybody in theory. Yeah, exactly. That doesn't mean anything to me at all whatsoever. You can't. That means he's really good at something. Potentially the elite of his time. With the exception of that, I don't really think it means anything. The place always gets topped, historically speaking. So you're never actually the greatest of all time. You're just the greatest up until that point. But that's not as fun to say because greatest up until that point is gut. And that's not as fun to put on a... Yeah, it's not as fun to put on the back of a shoe or whatever the case is. But no, it's annoying. I really strongly dislike that conversation because I think once you receive GOAT status, people kind of look at you as if like you can't make mistakes. This is interesting because this week LeBron got bounced, right? And this is a great example of that. For years, people have talked about him as the GOAT. Everything he's ever accomplished, he gets dropped in the first round. Now all of a sudden, is he actually the GOAT? Can you say he's really the GOAT if he got dropped in the first round? And it's like a year ago, the guy's the greatest player of all time. He's won a championship on 3 different teams. You know what I mean? Like he brought Cleveland back. He's been performing at an elite level since he was a teenager. He's had the public perception of being the prodigy, and somehow he actually kind of lived up to it in most instances. Has one really bad series after a really bad season. He's, 40 years old now at this point, so Father Time's going to catch up to him. And now all of a sudden it's like, man, he's not the GOAT. How can he be the GOAT if he did this? And it's like, yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. It's a stupid conversation to me. That's a roundabout way of saying it. We'll do it quickly.
No, I agree. I think, like you said, it fits for what it's used for, but it's just one of those terms or words. I don't know. There's another term to describe a term like this, but it's something that's used in a way of not in the intention of what it actually means. Like before, when you used to use the word asinine whenever you wanted to, despite it almost having no relevance to the conversation we were having, but it just fit. So
asinine. They did a game on Wild 'N Out. It's the first thing I always think of when I hear asinine. Mm-hmm. They had to use the word in a comedic sense. I don't remember. It's one of those Wild 'N Out bits. But the one guy, they gave him the word asinine, and he comes out and he's like, "Hey, girl, get your ass back in, or get back inside. Yo, ass is 9 months pregnant." And that's the first thing I think of every time I hear the term asinine is your ass is 9 months pregnant. So that's.
They had some good bits. You just have to have the right comedians to run with it. But all right, next one. We actually talked about this recently. I wish I could provide more context to that. Scratch that last one. HBO titty shots.
Oh, they're ridiculous.
Yeah.
Every TV show on HBO, the pilot of every episode on HBO has one scene where a chick is riding a dude just because they're allowed to. I watched Boardwalk Empire when I realized it's really bad. When I started Boardwalk Empire, it was a part of the show to a degree. I mean, the guy had a relationship with the woman, so it's not like the character wasn't meant to be a sex tool because that's kind of all she was to the guy. Spoilers if you haven't seen Boardwalk Empire. But I remember when it started, I was like, oh, okay, this is like a 20-second she's riding him scene. And they're just going to show as much as they can because they're allowed to. It's great that there's a platform that does not censor things like that. Because sometimes it can really add to a show. But I think with shows like Game of Thrones and True Blood and a few other shows on HBO that I could probably point at, it's usually done excessively because they're allowed to do it. So I have nothing against nudity or violence in film and TV. I think that when used properly, it can be incredibly powerful. But I do think that because they're allowed to, they always try to shoehorn it in. So I'm not a huge fan of that, admittedly.
Yeah, and something you just said that is kind of just draws in line with how I feel about it. When used in like properly, like in a sense where it adds to the story, no problem. But more than often, it's kind of just thrown in there. So more than anything, it's like you're following the story and it just pops up and like, oh, okay, that's happening. Or
yeah, exactly.
Especially don't be in a household where you have other people and you're watching the show and then that scene pops up and they walk in the room. You got to kind of explain like, hey, this has nothing to really do with like sex like that. There's just an element of it. This is actually about like robots and dragons. But I guess they had to throw that in there.
It's an incredibly big part of life, right? So it's always
Right,
going to find
right.
its way into stories, and I'm completely fine with that, and that makes total sense to me. But I will say there are certain like Westworld, for example, right? One of the things that they explore within the nudity usually is these are people taking advantage of these robots, right? Because a lot of the show is kind of built off of eventually the robots have a little bit of an uprising. So it kind of shows them being abused, essentially, being used in any way whatsoever that they want. So, like, it kind of makes sense, I guess, to push that in, something like that. Game of Thrones, they use sex as a power tool sometimes. So they find a way to incorporate it in the stories. But my concern sometimes is, let's say they pitch you and I, hey, we're going to give you guys your own show. And we're gonna be on HBO. We're immediately, it feels like, going to feel like we have to find a way to make sex a part of our story. Whereas maybe we want to tell the story of somebody who's, struggling to get their used car lot to a higher place so that they can sell it off and make money and then go be a professional singer. I don't know. That's just what I threw up off the top of my head. You can potentially fit in sex into a story like that, and I'm sure eventually you'll find a setting or a circumstance where it's potentially called for. But it feels like every episode there's at least one sex scene on every series. And there's nothing wrong with that, but to me, it's because they can, so they choose to. And like I said, I've got nothing against nudity or anything like that, but that's always one thing that I've had a little bit of like eye rolls when it comes to like HBO shows. You're like, oh, okay, of course, here's the sex scene because they can. And there's not, you can, I guess. I guess that's the benefit to not being on FX or something like that. But
yeah.
So that's my thought on HBO titty shots. Don't even get me started on Showtime's titty shots.
Well, I don't have that subscription, so that's fine. Until I get that subscription, maybe we can roll back to it and I actually have an opinion. But the next one I do have is the movie Avatar. And this is
James Cameron's
James
Avatar?
Cameron Avatar, yes.
Ooh, that's a tough one because I don't really know what to do with that film in my mind most of the time, right? Because for a long time when it first came out and you found out it was the highest grossing film ever, okay, this is clearly overrated. It's a really solid movie. It's a fun adventure. It's a little bit overlong. It's absolutely gorgeous to look at, but it's not as memorable as a lot of the other stories that are usually in that position. So I think for a long time, the consensus on that film was it's incredibly overrated. Then as time went on, there was almost a part of me that's like, it feels like nobody acknowledges that that was the biggest movie ever, and it almost feels underrated now at this point. Like, people don't really acknowledge its place. After having watched it again and seeing that they're cramming out, 4 sequels or whatever they're doing, I think there's going to be 5 of them altogether. I don't know. I don't care about the story, if I'm being completely honest. It was a beautiful film. I remember when I saw it in theaters, I saw it in 3D, and I was incredibly impressed just like everybody else was. With that being said, it's not like the most memorable movie in the world, with the exception of, I guess, some of the effects for its time. But I don't really know what to do with that film in my head. Like, I don't know what its place in film history is. It feels like a movie that got really, really lucky, but I know it wasn't. I know it was intended to be what it was. So there's a part of me that feels like you have to give James Cameron his credit there where it's due. But I am incredibly interested in seeing what kind of level of excitement this next Avatar brings. Because it's been so long now, I think some people view it as a legendary franchise. But if I'm being completely honest, I couldn't tell you a single character's name. Generally, I remember about where the film left off, but I don't really have any interest in seeing what happens next. Are you excited for the next movies? I guess I'll just shift it into that. Like, when you heard they're making 4 more, were you like, hell yeah, we're going to get this franchise rolling? Or were you like, holy shit, 5 more?
Yeah, so no, I wasn't excited. I was actually more than anything a bit confused because I didn't think it did a lot story wise to warrant 5 more movies. So if anything, my interest was just like, what are we talking about? You know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't the best way I describe it is like Star Wars. If you're gonna tell me you're gonna make all these different series and all these different shows from Star Wars, it's a big enough universe that I'm like, okay, I can see how you can delve into some of these niche factors of what was the overall story compared to the Skywalker saga. With Avatar, I thought the story was pretty straightforward about the usual. Here comes these guys that aren't from this land. They're trying to take from the land, and you have the indigenous people, and they're spiritual, and the person that finds that spirituality and starts to understand them and gets caught in the crossroads between the two. Like, again, I'm not shitting on the movie, but it's like you've heard that story. So I didn't think there was like a lot more you could get from it. So when I heard there was going to be more, I'm like I said, I wasn't excited, but I was like, okay, I'll see what we're going to see, what we're going to do. I mean, it's James Cameron. I'm interested because it's him. But at the same time, I agree with you, too. I do think is something that over the years is kind of had a even flow with being considered overrated. And then you have some people who go back and say, like, oh, it's this incredible movie. So for that reason, I think too, when you're looking at, especially if you're looking at it like, what are the other films that have grossed the amount of money that did on that list? Like all of those are like iconic, big time kind of stuff. I mean, most of them. Mm-hmm. Right. So I'm trying to think through the list in my head. I'm like, most of them. So it was like a milestone in film in terms of like the visuals. That was like the big thing I've always heard, the big thing that I seen out of it.
A lot of the technology they used to film it, like a lot of those things were the things that it was most impressive with.
You know, so that's my take on it. But as far as the other ones, again, we'll see what he does. But I don't know story wise. There's nothing about the story that makes me really want to go back and see what's up.
What's your favorite scene in the movie Avatar?
My favorite scene would be when when they fly on those winged beasts, the first time when they do that and they have the tail things attached to it, because I thought that was cool. I thought the fact that they actually had the physical connection to nature, I thought that was like one of the coolest things ever. So that scene and the scene where like they're all flying into battle, that I really like that. But yeah, everything else was just, and it also too, we're in middle school or high school when that came out.
Yeah, 2008 I think is when it came out.
Middle school, and there was also that was also funny enough. We talk about things are nowadays, but there was this big conversation about like, was James Cameron making the indigenous people after like African people or something? And that whole conversation, me as a kid, got me really confused because I was like, I mean, it was like they literally had a picture of some black woman with a hoop earring, and they showed one of the, I don't even know what the race is called, but they showed one of them with a hoop earring, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't think that's good. But I'm also just kind of now talking about slavery in school, so I don't even know how to like grasp that, if that makes sense. So that's another thing that kind of diluted that movie for me a bit. But
I think where that movie really fails, and this isn't meant to be like an excessive knock, James Cameron does an incredible job throughout all of his biggest films of, you really strongly care about the main characters, right? Terminator, obviously you have the Terminator himself. He's an incredibly iconic character. Ripley in Aliens is incredible. It's the end of the movie where she comes back and fights her and all that other kind of stuff. Rose and Jack are very well known from Titanic. Avatar is his most successful film, and I don't remember the two main characters' names. I think that's where they really... I remember there's a romance at the top of the film because it's Zoe Saldana, right? She's the main Avatar, or whatever they're called. I know the Avatar is him. If I remember.
The name just popped in my head for a second. I forgot it, but
no, I don't remember the main character's name in the movie. But I remember feeling like when I got done with it, it's not a knock on the lead actor specifically, because I don't know if he's good in anything else. But I do remember being a little bit bored by the main guy specifically, and that's a little unusual. Like I said, you go back through the James Cameron things that he's most well known for, and usually there's very memorable characters. You know what I mean? Like usually that's one thing that he does very good on. And in this film, I didn't think it was as well done in that regard. The universe was cool, though. But yeah, I'm interested. We'll see. We'll see if they ever come out. They got pushed back like 15 times. They were supposed to. Do you know they were originally supposed to come out like 2 or 3 years ago? Like when they announced it a few years ago, they're like the first one's 2019 or 2020, and then they pushed it back because of Star Wars, and then I don't know when they're coming out now.
We'll see. I guess when they need to give people a chance to breathe from some of their other franchises.
December 16th, 2022. That is when Avatar 2 is scheduled to be released. Avatar 3 in December 20th, 2024. And I believe Avatar 4 has also been greenlit, so there are 3 more films coming. What do they do if the first one's a failure?
Whatever. You're locked in, dude. I mean, yeah. I mean, no, these are all good questions.
They got a lot of faith in this franchise. This isn't the Marvel Cinematic Universe where like people are just down for whatever the hell else comes out at this point. Like if I remember when Independence Day 2 came out, I was working at the movie theater, and a lot of people were like, dude, this is going to be so dope. When 3 comes out, they're going to get Will Smith back. And I remember thinking like, well, let him get to 3. Do you know what I mean? Like, let this movie make a lot of money first. You're just immediately assuming because Independence Day was very successful that this film's going to be very successful. Like, there's a really strong chance that Avatar 2 ends up being mediocre and being not as well received as people expect. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's going to make billions of dollars like the first one did. It feels to me, though, that this is doomed before it happens. But that's just me being cynical, I suppose.
We'll find out January 2023 because I'm not seeing it in theaters. I take that back. That's me being a bit cynical. I don't see most things in theaters nowadays, so that's why I assume I'll be watching it in January when it's on demand. But next one, this is a bit of left field. Magikarp, the Pokemon.
I have no opinion.
I could give you my opinion first if you want.
Yeah, go ahead. You probably actually have one, so you take this. You take this segment.
It's a quick opinion because, I mean, if you played any of the Game Boy games or ever watched the anime, the dude gets treated like shit. Like, he gets treated like an actual fish and flails outside of water, and everybody's just like, oh, you're useless. There's no good to you. And then he turns to Gyarados to start fucking on everybody. So he's underrated in that sense. I feel like, because it always seems like with Magikarp and its iteration, it's always... it gets, like, the shit kicked out of him and then evolves into Gyarados and goes on a rampage. I always wondered, what if you give a Magikarp love or care and actually make it feel valued? What is it going to be then when it turns to Gyarados, you know? But that's just 10-year-old Mo and some of my thoughts about Pokemon and the weird element of being a trainer, and they're happy slaves essentially, because I don't think when you beat them in the wild and capture them, they just automatically fall in love with you. So there's something in that Pokeball that brainwashes them, and then they become your guy. Or no, you got to get the right badge. That's what it is. If you don't have a certain level of respect as a trainer, they don't care. And that's what happened to Ash and his Charizard. Charizard's like, you're a bit of a pussy, so you're not going to tell me what to do right now.
No, I know you're supposed to catch him and then leave him at the trainer's house for a really long time.
That's the oh yeah.
Or the babysitter.
Well, yeah, and then you get a whole bunch of eggs and
and then eventually you're like, hey, that's a bigger, what is it called after Magikarp?
Gyarados.
Gyarados. Yeah.
Well, it's the problem. We're not gonna get into it, but you don't leave it at the trainer's house, because then certain moves you want it to learn, it might get overwritten, because when they level up, they just delete whatever move is in a certain slot. But that's just me being a little bit nerdy. Next one.
BIGBLERD.
Coming soon, by the way. We're going to be getting some of my own videos put up, and it's just going to be about nerdy stuff like that. So if you want to hear me splurge about Magikarp and my fantasy of what a Magikarp would be like if he wasn't treated like shit, just stay tuned for that. But
all I heard was the word splurge and fantasy about Magikarp. So as of right now, I'm probably not watching your podcast. Sounds dirty.
No, it's I don't think splurge is a dirty word or Magikarp, but it's
fantasies about Magikarp that cause splurging seem to be.
People have taken the word fantasy out of the definition of what that means, and now all of a sudden,
people? You're talking about me trying to read.
I'm talking about everybody. It's not just you. Like, people hear fantasy and they assume fantasy means like fetish, and even then, I don't even know like if fetish is exclusively a sexual thing or not. But whatever. Next one.
Fetishes, overrated or underrated?
I don't know. Probably underrated, because I think a lot of times people get I don't know, stigmatized, the word, or a lot of times people don't get a chance to kind of explore those thoughts. I'm not saying every single one is productive or morally correct, and that's a whole nother conversation, but there's a lot of stuff that like people just have an interest in, and out of fear of how the other people would react to it, they just kind of hold it to themselves. And I think in those cases is where it gets a lot worse, because I'm sure there's people out there who thought they liked something, and when it happened, they were like, oh, actually, you know what? That's not for me. I thought it was, it ain't. But for the folks that don't, then it just kind of festers and yada, yada, yada. But yes, I think it's underrated a bit. But my actual question, I was going to ask you about hair metal, but I want to be more specific to Motley Crue. What do you think about those guys? Or the music?
I'll start with Motley Crue and then I'll move into hair metal. They're all right musically. That's one of the things for me when I was young and I was getting into a lot of bands. You kind of go through history. You'd learn about a new subgenre or a genre, whatever the case is. And then you would discover those bands, and you would look for the hits and the things that you really liked about them. And I've seen Motley Crue live 3 times. My aunt's a big fan, and we've gone and seen them every time. All 3 times that I've seen them, the opening act has been better than them, and they haven't been great, admittedly. I don't love their music. I like some songs, but generally speaking, as I've gotten older, I've definitely moved away from that genre of music quite a bit. Yeah, not a huge Motley Crue fan. Like I said, they got some all right songs. Hair metal across the board is very similar to me in that regard, where I feel like a lot of the bands, it's my least favorite type of pop music, if that makes sense. Like, I like parts of it, and I respect the musicianship, because a lot of those dudes are, they're all right musicians, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of them can genuinely play guitar really well, or they got some really solid drummers. Some of the front men in hair metal are genuinely, legitimately talented. But musically, it's interesting. I remember growing up, I always used to hear, like, with rap, man, it's just all the same shit. All it is this, and, it's shoot and kill and sell money and big bootied bitches. And then I would listen to country music, and I would be like, oh, so this isn't the same fucking song over and over again? And then you listen to hair metal, and you're like, this isn't the same song over and over again. Like, it's the party scene. It's Sunset Boulevard. It's about fucking chicks. It's about doing drug and partying your asses off. It's about a bad romance. Everybody's got their ballad. So I think when you take that kind of music that's generic and repetitive, hair metal is some of my least favorite version of that. And that sucks to say, because growing up, I always, I was into a lot of those bands. I used them to discover bands that I was a lot more of a fan of. But it's all right. I think it's a really interesting spot in pop culture to look back on.
Yeah. Music-wise, I'm right there with you. There's some songs I like. If I hear it, I'll be like, oh, yeah, it's that song. I'll jam out to it for a second, but it's not my go-to. I would say rarely do I get into like a random mood where, like, the other day I got into a random mood where all I wanted to listen to was like 90s R&B, or the day before that, for some reason, all I wanted to listen to was folk music. I've never been like, I definitely want to listen to some hair metal right now.
Yeah, maybe a song here and there, but I've never been like, hey, today's a rat kind of a day.
And then also,
that's all right though.
Every like big fan, most big fans that I've met, oddly enough, have always been like a teacher in high school, and they were always the douchey teacher that I didn't like. But they were like, "Oh, of course you listen to hair metal." Like, not to say people who listen to hair metal are douches, but it just fits with that. Yes, yeah. So, not good representation on that.
Is Van Halen considered hair metal? I think
that's
so.
a good question because Van Halen's a shit.
Yeah, Van Halen's got some good music. I like some Scorpion songs. Poison's got a few good songs here and there.
Yep. I mean, I'm blanking on their name right now. We're gonna come back to that. I don't want to add some dead air.
Okay.
Oh man,
Next question. There. Next
Rock of Ages.
Oh, Def Leppard. Yeah, Def Leppard's hair as hell. Yep.
You know, so I like Def Leppard. So it's yeah. You can't go full yay or nay on everything, right?
But I think it's a genre that's not very deep. And I think that's probably the problem. I think that's the reason some of it sounds so repetitive. I think when you genuinely go back, it was a few-year period. There weren't a crazy amount of great albums. But when you go into it, like, I think that was one of the issues, too, is I think I would like it a lot more if I wasn't around so many people that were such a big fan of it. Because then you kind of start getting exposed to, like, all of it. And, like, I don't mind Cinderella. I think Cinderella's an okay band every once in a while. I don't mind Skid Row. There are a few Skid Row songs. I feel like that's how it is with most of those bands for me. Is it's like, I don't hate their hits necessarily, but I also don't seek them out. Those are the hits that I've had beaten into my head. Like, growing up, those are the songs that I heard the most by far. So I think for me, it's like, all right, well, it's like, growing up in your family was a huge Beatles fan. It's like, I like the Beatles, but I heard so much Beatles when I was growing up that it's hard. It wasn't like that for me. I was able to discover the Beatles after all of those things. So for me, it was like, oh, if you keep going, this gets a lot better. Like, there's a lot of really good music out there. But I don't want to be overly negative on hair metal. I will say, though, it feels like hair metal was born after Kiss. And that's not entirely true. I know that that's not the case. But for some reason, I correlate those two things in my brain. And I am not at all a Kiss fan. So, there's that.
Knew where that one was going.
I just wanted to shit on Kiss a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Next one is Google. And I mean specifically the search engine Google.
Overrated or underrated?
Yep.
Fuck Google. That's it.
Okay, I'll give a little devil's advocate a little bit. I think it's underrated because of the fact that it's such I'd say using a Google search nowadays is almost akin to breathing. Like, you don't even think about it. Mm-hmm. You got a question or something you got to figure out. You immediately go, all right, let me look it up. Like, how many times have we done that individually in this conversation, talking about something? We go, well, let me check that out real quick. Like, that availability to information like that is so crazy to think about, yet we're already in that sense of just, it's a norm that we don't necessarily appreciate it. So you've always been somebody who, when it comes to a certain subject, it's like you could just recall events almost to the detail of how it happened, and I envied that a lot because my memory is shit sometimes. But it's also gotten to the point now where, as much as that was something valued and those people are like, man, this guy he's like a human dictionary. Now it's like, well, I could just Google it. I could look it up real quick. So
yeah,
I think, yeah.
I'll give you two things about Google that I like. I agree. The access to information is probably one of the greatest accomplishments in human history, right? Like that accessibility to information. It's made it a lot easier to be organized, right? Like it's a lot easier to Google a specific question on a subject than it is to go to a library, find that book, and read through it and hope to find that specific information. But with that being said, I feel like it's made it hard. Like, remember when we were growing up in school and teachers, when they were teaching math, were like, well, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket when you grow up. And it's like, aha, actually I do. Aha, actually we suck at math. For that reason, because we don't learn it, right? We have something to do it and process it for us, which, as long as that works, that's awesome, right? We can be codependent on this technology for that information because of that reason. No human in history is expected to know everything, unless we're going to go back to that immortal conversation earlier where we're going to have one wise person who just stays alive forever to maintain everything. But I feel like there's a lot of information that people, they don't learn because of Google. If I don't know, it's not specific, it's not Google's fault specifically, but it's because of tools like that we feel less incentivized to memorize things because there's really no need to memorize it. Like, why would I memorize a bit of information when I know in 6 months I can find that information again? And I think you see that quite often when you have people like, let me show you this article, let me show you this thing, and then they can't go find it. Do you know what I mean? Because they just so happen to stumble into it, and they're like, I read this thing, it's really informative, let me Google it and try to find it. And some people don't even really, like, they've been there and they've seen it themselves, and they can't even go back and find where it was at or anything like that. How often do you process what website you're reading stories from? I mean, if you're reading the news on CNN every single day, okay, CNN is probably where I got my news from. But if you're one of those people like I just did, I just Googled the release date of Avatar. Off the top of my head, I could not tell you what website I was just looking at that had that information. Even more so, I named 2 dates for Avatar. Do you remember what those dates were?
For when they're coming out?
Yeah, for their release dates.
December 22nd of 2022 and December 23rd of 2024. I'm probably wrong on the exact
Okay,
dates,
so go for those dates one more time. I want to see if you remember the dates you just said, too.
I think it was December 22nd of 2022 and December 23rd of 2024.
Okay. Avatar 2 is being released on December 16th, 2022, and Avatar 3 is being released on December 20th, 2024. Not to say that that's, necessarily part of the problem, right? Because realistically, you just heard me say those real quick. You didn't process them, all those other things. But so while it is beautiful that we have access to information, in a lot of instances, we don't even really know what to do with that information. And it doesn't mean I'm opposed to it having a place to just sit and rest like it kind of does through Google. And then 2, too much data. They have way too much access to way too much information, and they utilize it and sell it. And I don't love that. It's something I'm not a huge fan of.
So in terms of the company, definitely agree.
Yeah. But the Google search specifically is how they access that data. They take the things that you're searching, and that's where they get it from. So only specifically speaking to the search bar, still there's that. They know your thoughts, man. That's what got Casey Anthony caught. Well, she didn't, and nothing ended up happening because of it, but you can go back and you can see she was like, hey, how do you do this? And it's interesting.
It's
a good thing and a bad thing, but
yeah, and we'll see how that works going forward because there's been a lot of push for regulations with privacy and how companies can track that stuff, and you see Apple and Google already trying to get in front of that regulation that's going to come with these updates they made to the operating system that gives the user more control on it. Doesn't mean it's total control, and there's always those back doors and all that kind of stuff, but those are all really good points that we'll see what we do as a society to get away from that, because it's not even a question of how damaging it's been for us. So,
and when I watched that documentary about the social dilemma, one of the people speaking on it said that we alerted Google of some of the things that we were concerned about, and we were kind of like scolded for even bringing up those as potential issues for people.
Yeah, dude.
Also, like,
we're making fucking money over here.
Yeah, exactly. When you search certain information in certain regions of the country, you get different search results based off of the people searching around you. So it's not even truth in information. It's just accessibility based off of analytics in most instances. And I think that while that it's interesting, I don't want to be overly critical of it because, like I said, it's beautiful to have. In theory, like we could just find out 2 release dates off the top of our heads. Do you remember those release dates now that I've read them twice?
December 16th of 2022 and December 20th of 2024. I'm good with numbers. Everything else, yeah, good luck. But names, good luck. What else to say? This would be the perfect time where if somebody were to sponsor us, we throw in a VPN sponsor. So just want to put that out there. We're going to talk about this, and you should probably go ahead and sponsor us. ExpressVPN.
That's one of the things for me that I'm always nervous about. I'm like, damn, dude, we're going to have to be careful about the shit we talk about if we get a Manscaped sponsorship. Because then you have to just gradually be like, and here's how you shave your balls. But back to the conversation about how to bring races together. You know what I mean?
Funny enough, that was actually the next one.
Manscaped?
What is over under manscaping? Just manscaping, period.
Oh, take care of yourself. Be clean. Yeah.
Right away, dude. I never got why that was a feminine thing. Like, especially not to be super like graphic, but I'm black and we have curly hair. So, and yeah, I know it's incredible, right? But it's not just curly on our head. So it's like that's just
like your eyebrows
bro.
and shit too.
Yeah, exactly. So
wait a minute. Do you think straight people have like, or I'm sorry, white people have straight pubic hair?
No, but what I mean by that is more like
like it's just combed.
No, I was going along the line of like just the curl pattern, like
probably, yeah, like waves.
Like that's why like shaving wise, we are more susceptible to ingrown hairs because of the curl pattern of our hairs. So, you know, the more you know. Next one, Baby Yoda.
Grogu.
Grogu?
That's the name of Baby Yoda.
Oh shit.
So
didn't know that.
In my opinion, Grogu is a great character. Baby Yoda as a concept is like the Minions, and it weirds me out. Like, I don't know if when the Minions got big, it was really weird seeing how many like people just took a regular meme and threw a minion on it, and all of a sudden it sticks. Baby Yoda started to feel the same way to me. Like, it was like, it's cute as hell, but I feel like its cuteness is being manipulated to make these memes that wouldn't be great otherwise work. But within the context of The Mandalorian, I didn't think I liked the show very much. And then I got into the second season, and I'm not going to lie, dude, at the end, when the Mandalorian and the Grogu were having their goodbye and stuff, for spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen it, there was a part of me that was starting to get a little bit emotional. So it was well executed. It was a very good character. It's definitely the only reason, in my opinion, that The Mandalorian worked. I think if you take that one character out of the show, it's 100 times less interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean,
but as a piece of merchandise, holy shit, that's the most successful thing Disney has done with Star Wars so far, is that little Baby Yoda. Grogu, just call it Grogu. It's his fucking name. That's disrespectful.
What about BB-8 though?
BB-8,
because I've seen a lot more BB-8 toys than Grogu.
Yeah, I mean, maybe since it's come out, but Baby Yoda has definitely been like the image. That, like, I know they're doing something in Galaxy's Edge right now that's supposed to make it more like the Mandalorian's world as opposed to the Skywalker saga world. I love BB-8 too. I thought BB-8 was a great character. In my opinion, even going back and watching any of the Star Wars movies, that's like the heart. The droids are what made it work. Without R2 and C-3PO, that story has a lot less heart, and they're fantastic characters. R2-D2 is the best character in all of the Star Wars movies. In my opinion, every time he's on screen, it makes me happy. So I'm not going to be mad about it. BB-8 was kind of like that. I will say, though, in Force Awakens, I think they pushed a little far for what the droid could do. They gave it the thumbs up thing was a cute little scene, and it made me laugh. But I'm glad they didn't do stuff like that excessively with BB-8. And BB-8 did very much fall to the wayside in the next two films. It's a cute character, though. I agree.
Yeah. A lot of things fell to the wayside with that.
Yeah, like trilogy, diversity.
Yeah. Among other shit. So, let's see. Next we got deep dish pizza.
Oh, I like deep dish pizza. It's cool. Do you prefer it to, what is it, flatbreads or thin crust?
Nowadays, because I'm actually trying to lose weight, no. But in terms of, like, actual taste, hell yeah, dude. Like, I unfortunately still haven't had authentic Chicago style from Chicago deep dish. But, I mean, everyone I have, because I think in most cases with deep dish, other than the fact that it's any pan style crust or deep dish crust, is the cheese. And like that's the biggest thing I look forward to, is a big cheesy deep dish pizza. So terrible for you.
I know it is bad for you for sure. I've always liked deep dish pizza though. I got no complaints on that one.
Well, the last ones you had very solid opinions in one way or the other. I don't. I guess with this one, it was just like that was one of those quick ones I told you about. But
we'll do two more and then we'll call it an episode. My apologies.
That works for me. No, you're good. Next one's vinyls.
Vinyls? Awesome. You have to, I will say, this is one thing that I learned about vinyls, and it's the one downfall of collecting them. I like finding them, right? Like, I like going to vinyl shops and finding a used, it's cool when you find a new copy too, but it's always really cool when you can search through it. If you want them to be worth it, you have to spend a little bit of money. And that's what sucks about it. Like most people, when I bought my first vinyls, I had the little Crosley home players that you can buy, and those are not good for your vinyls. So it's one of those things where it's like, if you're going to invest in it, it's a consistent investment. You're definitely creating a collection. I think it's cool. I like physically owning music. It makes me feel like I'm contributing to the art a lot more than just by going on there and streaming. Because I know every time you stream a song, the artist makes like a 20th of a cent off of it, or whatever the case is. So for me, it's nice knowing that like I just spent $15 on a vinyl, or realistically, I just spent $80 on a vinyl is usually how it goes. But I think they're awesome. I think you need a decent piece of equipment to listen to them on, but it sounds awesome. I like that like vintage sound that it has. I like the cracks, and I like the texture on the vinyl itself. Like, I think those are all awesome.
Yeah, and like you said, it is an investment. It's not something you can go into it casually, but you get the best out of it. The part that's worth it, the high fidelity music out of it, by investing in the right equipment and properly storing the vinyls as well. Because I learned that the hard way, unfortunately. I lost one of my vinyls because I didn't properly store it. I was moving, put it in a bag in the basement. When I came back to it, I don't know exactly what happened, but it warped a little bit. So it just wasn't going to play correctly. So I learned, like, okay, I need to make sure I actually properly store these things and make sure that it's not exposed to like weird temperatures, whatever. I don't think it was so much a temperature, more than maybe it was just in a bad spot or something when I was moving. But yeah, I think it's, again, if you're a audiophile, if you just love music and really want to get into the intricacies of how it's made, vinyl's one is the best kind. Because the first time, what got me into wanting to get a vinyl, you had To Pimp a Butterfly on vinyl, and it was on one of those little Crosby vinyl players, but not listening in my car system and actually listening to Wesley's Theory on vinyl, I was hearing so many different sounds that I never heard before. I'm like, dude, this is insane. So that just got me hooked, and ever since, I've loved it.
Do you have a specific album that you're hoping to find on vinyl one day? Like, do you have a hidden gem that you haven't been able to stumble across? You order them online, so you already cheat. But
I've ordered 2 online, man. And it was just because they were like essentials for me. So it was like, I'm going to find it somewhere, or I could get it now and have it. It was 2 Jay-Z ones. So, or I'm sorry, 1 Jay-Z, 1 Mac DeMarco. Trying to remember which ones I bought. Anyway, no, I guess the one that if I found, like, without any hesitation, I would definitely get. Man, what would that be? It's hard to say, because not having the equipment myself right now, my vinyls are just kind of safely stored. So there hasn't been like a whole lot that I've been like thinking about vinyl wise to search for. There's a song or music I want to listen to, I stream it. Mm-hmm. So that's the one thing about vinyls that it's hard to overcome. I don't have to worry about that. I gotta find it first before I can listen to it. But we talked about one before. All the Notorious B.I.G. vinyls we found, the Ready to Die, they were always the like anniversary edition covers, not the original.
Like a deluxe. I agree, with the baby on the front.
Yeah, so if I found something like that, I would definitely get it just for that iconic album cover. I think that for me would be the ones. It'd be the ones that either had a very iconic album cover or had a special like vinyl, like the Black Sabbath vinyl I got that's all red. I loved it for that reason. So that was a must for me to get. So yeah, I right now there's not anything more specific than maybe that Notorious one.
The two that I want, or there's one for sure that I want that I haven't been. It's New Order, Power, Corruption, Lies. It's one of their bigger albums too, so it's always been surprising to me that I've never been able to find that specifically on vinyl. And then I've never been able to find. I found it, but it cost $100, so I wasn't gonna buy it. But Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, the Smashing Pumpkins album, that's another one that I haven't been able to find. That's like a real copy of it that isn't like a deluxe edition that costs $750 or whatever the case is.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. I didn't even think about that one. That is my point. Like, if I want to listen to Smashing Pumpkins, I could just crank it up. But I agree, man. I think it's a great thing to get into if you got the money to spend on it.
That's the important part. If you got the money to spend on it, it's fun to get into. If you don't, it's still fun to get into. It's just a lot more stressful because then you're like, oh shit, I just dropped $80 this week. Sometimes on 3 albums. That's the one thing I did hate about it. Is sometimes you go to some of those vinyl shops and you're like, damn man, it's a good album and all, but $40.
Yeah, it's like you said, that at that point you're a fan of the artist and a fan of the music more than anything, because you can't deny the accessibility of streaming, even high fidelity streaming at not even at a quarter of that price, literally. $10 a month compared to $40, and you still got to make sure you got a good player, and you got to have good speakers, and you got to maintain that. If it's depending on, like, if it's a belt driven player, you got to maintain that belt. There's a couple different things that go into it, but like I said, if you got the money for it. We got enough for one more, or?
Yeah, we got enough for one more. We're going to do our closing topic here today. Thank you guys for listening to Sacred Time. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but we're going to close out with our thoughts and opinions on the subject of
MF Doom.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
My question, I'll give you a question based off of Doom.
Okay.
Realistically, what do you think, not just him, but artists like him's place in hip-hop is going to be remembered as? Because the dude was never a mainstream star, but if you're a hip-hop head, he's somebody that you undoubtedly have a ton of respect for, even if you're not somebody who specifically listens to their music. And it feels like there are quite a few artists like him who don't have their name mentioned in the list of greats, but people who are really into hip-hop usually appreciate them as if they were one. So what do you think ultimately his place in hip-hop is going to be remembered as?
I think his place is going to be remembered as being a really good artist, because as much as I really like his music, he had never released anything that was like, I would say, that was like critically out of this world, or something like that was a stamp on the industry like that. Like, for instance, when we were talking about Kendrick earlier, when Good Kid, Mad City comes out, that instantly, or at least in its time being played on the radio and whatnot, people are already like, hey, this is an iconic album. And then it's, went on to, like, To Pimp a Butterfly was his magnum opus, but they were undeniable albums that when you go back into the history of hip hop and rap, they're going to be mentioned. I don't think MF Doom has those kind of records, but that takes nothing away from his creativity, from musically, the things that he got into. Like, there's a whole album, I wish I remembered the name of it, and it's just like a compilation of different beats. And I remember listening to all of it thinking like, oh, there's a song or something that I've heard before that I never really put two to two together until I heard this. And it wasn't necessarily that he had the original, it was just that he was doing a lot with these other sounds and ideas that was very much just his personality, what he liked, that when you got people who are very into their own ideas, their own characters, like not character in the sense of like the mask and everything, but like who he was, you've seen that all through his music. So it was very authentic, and it was a joy to hear. So it's always a joy to hear. So I think he'll be somebody like you said, if you know your stuff about hip hop, about rap, and his name gets brought up, you'll be able to say like, hey, he's got some great hits, he's got some great records. But I don't think it'll be something that people go back and say like he was as big as like a giant influence on the genre or something. He definitely was an influence, but not to the extent of like a Snoop Dogg or a Dr. Dre or a wow, I'm blanking on the group I'm thinking of right now. Hey, I'm bad at names. I said that earlier in the podcast, so there's no disrespect to this group. I just did it. The Fantastic Five. I didn't want to say it wrong. I probably still said it wrong. Anyway, yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of how I feel about him in that regard.
Yeah, I think he's a pure MC. I love MF Doom's music. I think Mad Villainy is an iconic hip hop album, but it's not as well known as a bunch of other of the hit. Like we were talking about Ready to Die earlier. It's obviously not like, praised in the same regard as something like that. It's dope. In my opinion, he was one of those really cool artists that like, I always liked the style of everything that he did. I always liked the comic book style on the art of the album covers. The Doom name in its own right, I thought was dope as fuck anyways, because Victor Von Doom is the shit. With that being said though, there was one thing about his career that I didn't love to hear about. I didn't like the Doom bots. I didn't like hearing about that. That made me really sad to find out. It's a dope concept in theory. It's just the idea of going to a concert, paying for a performance for a specific artist, and then finding out that it was a guy who looks like the artist, dressed like the artist, performing the artist's songs, but knowing that the proceeds are still probably going to that artist. Like, it just, I don't know. It's one of those things that I don't remember if they ever actually proved whether or not that was a thing, but I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, it was a thing where there were a few people going out and performing multiple cities at once under the same name. That sucked to find out a little bit, but with the exception of something like that, I think it's crazy to me. When he passed away, I thought like, oh shit, now is the time where people are going to finally learn about him and he's going to blow up and be the thing that he probably could have been the entire time. And it wasn't like that. I think he had one album jump up really quick on iTunes. I think one of his albums jumped up to #1 on iTunes the week that he passed away, and then that was about the extent of it. But R.I.P. Doom. Dope ass music, pure MC. I love artists like that. That's my kind of hip hop. That's the kind of shit that I prefer listening to, generally speaking.
Real quick, I was trying to say the Furious Five. There is a group called the Fantastic Five, but I was referred to the Furious Five.
Like Grandmaster Flash.
I suck at I suck at names. I knew it was Grandmaster Flash, but I was like, it's not the Fab Five because I know that's Michigan. Is it a Fantastic Five? And that didn't sound right either.
That's the Fantastic Four.
Exactly.
When there are five of them, they're furious.
There is there is a group called the Fantastic Five. It's like the Grand Wizard Theodore and Fantastic Five.
Whoa! What the hell are you listening to? The Grand Wizard.
Yeah, nah, this is a whole nother thing.
Started and ended the podcast on a bad note, Maurice.
It's all good. People know my intentions.
Nope.
No.
But no, that was fun. We'll run through a few more of those topics as we keep going, and I still got a few more that I have written down, so we'll definitely bounce between all of those. In the meantime, thank you for listening to Sacred Time. My name is Dennis Kaminsky. He's Maurice Starr. If you want more things Sacred Time, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Sacred Time Pod. Also, if you'd like more Sacred Time videos, go to YouTube and like and subscribe. You know how that shit works. You heard all this at the end of everybody else's videos. Besides that, thank you for listening to Sacred Time, and remember, time is sacred. Thank you very much.